So today I want to go over the minion focused Necromancer build I've been using in last Epoch. Now I'm currently level 62, but you'll be able to get a good idea of this build once you get to level 50, so you'll be able to specialize all of your different skills, start putting in those points, and that'll give you a pretty good idea of how this build's going to work all the way up until level 100 and getting into the very late stages of the end game. And this build is actually pretty simple. You're getting as many summons as you can possibly get, you're changing them all to fire damage, and then you're letting them kill everything while you run around and try to not die. And with that being said, I think the best place to start is our skills and our skill specialization, starting off with Summon Skeleton, which is the first thing you're going to be specializing into. And as you're leveling up, the first thing you're going to want to do is start putting points into Unholy Rage to go into Fire Arrows. So now your skeletal archers have fire scaling and they'll be using Fire Arrow, then 3 points in a multi-shot. So now anytime your archers use their Fire Arrow, it'll be a big spread doing a lot of AoE damage. Then you're going to want to go into Love Guardian, which brings you into Mightier Than the Sword, which removes all warriors from Summon Skeleton. Summon Skeleton normally will randomly either summon skeletal warriors or archers. We remove the warriors, so now every single summon of our skeleton will be a fire archer using Fire Arrow. Then as you continue to level up, you're just going to primarily be getting more damage, and you're going to go into all the skills that allow you to summon more skeletons. I can currently have 8 skeletons out at a time, so you're going down here to get more skeletons, going down here to get even more, then you're going up here to get even more. And the rest of your point, you're going to be going into Necrotic Conviction, massively increasing their damage, and then if you have any leftover points once you're high level, you'll probably just go into Sweeping Strikes for some additional damage scaling. Then we'll be going into our Bone Golem, and the same thing, we're going to be going over and turning it into a Pyre Goblin. So we're getting increased attack speed, which then gives melee fire damage, which will then turn our Golem into a Pyre Goblin, and then we're going into World Pyre, so our Pyre Golem's big Infernal Aura, which is a big aura that does fire damage, is now going to be much bigger, deal more damage, and because I'm trying to get the most summons as possible, I'm also going up and getting Twin Golems, which allows you to have 2 Golems. They're just both going to be weaker and a bit smaller. Then as I continue to level up and get more points, I'm going to go down and put points into Tower of Bones, primarily because this will massively increase the threat generated by your Golem, because you want your Golem tanking as much as it possibly can. Golems are still very tanky, and you don't want anything hitting you, you want them hitting any of your summons. Then for our third skill, we're going to be going into Summon Skeletal Mage. And the same thing as everything else, we're going to be changing it to fire damage. So we're going to go down Putridescence. This will go down into Pyromancers, meaning now we can summon Pyromancers instead of normal mages. And then we're going to go down, we're going to get Inferno, which increases their health, but it removes normal mages from Skeletal Mage summon. So now anytime we summon a mage, it's going to be a Pyromancer. Now while you're leveling up, the second thing I'd probably do after you turn your mages into Pyromancers is to go up and get Grave Passage. Now this is going to give your Summon Mage skill a cooldown, but you're really not using Summon Mage on cooldown. They usually survive for a long time, so you're not going to need to use it a lot, but this also means your Summon Mage is now a teleport. So anytime you summon a new mage, it's going to teleport you to wherever you summon that mage, and that's going to give you quite a lot of movement, and that's going to be your main movement ability. You're also going to be getting some buffs for your mages going through here, and then past that, as you continue to level up, all you're really going to be doing is getting more damage and the ability to summon more mages. You can come down here, you can summon another skeletal mage, but after you get the teleport, the main thing you're probably going to want is Splinter Dominion, where now your mage will just shoot extra projectiles and they'll have a bigger area of effect. And then our fourth skill is going to be Summon Wraith. Now Summon Wraith is basically temporary minions you can summon. They'll constantly lose health over time, but you can constantly summon them. This is the only thing we're really going to be using mana on, and you'll be able to have up to 6 additional summons. And the first thing you're going to want to be putting points into once you get Summon Wraith specialized is you're going to want to go over and get Flame Wraith. Now this gives a 22% chance at 2 points to summon a Flame Wraith, also gives a little bit more damage, and you're probably thinking that a 22% chance for a Flame Wraith is actually a really low chance, and that's true, but as you continue to level up and get more idols, there are actually idols you can get that massively increase the chance for your Wraith skill to summon Flame Wraiths, and Flame Wraiths are going to get a lot more scaling because you're going to be scaling your fire damage for all your other minions, and Flame Wraiths are a ranged summon, so that's actually going to help with our final skill as well. So you're probably not going to be getting a ton of Flame Wraiths while leveling up. Wraiths are still going to be good on their own, but as you get more idols, and if you get lucky to get some of the good idols, you'll be able to get a lot more Flame Wraiths, and at some point you'll have a 100% chance to always get a Flame Wraith, which is where you want to be as you get into the end game. And then past that, I'm just going in to give them a lot more crit, more damage, more crit, and then scale their crit multiplier to put some points into reducing their health decay, and we can heal them off of our crits. And then as you continue to level up, you can also go up here and get more wraiths. So I can currently, without the more wraiths node, I can have 6 wraiths out at a time. And because I got some of the points so their health doesn't decay as quick, they can stay out for a decent bit of time. But once you get higher level, you can get even more wraiths, up to 8. So you'll be able to have even more summons. And then once you get 100% flame wraith chance, you'll just be able to have 8 flame wraiths out, all doing range fire damage, which will massively increase your overall damage output. But then our final skill is going to be Dread Shade. Now, pretty much all this is going to do, and how we're using it in this build, is you're going to put it on any of your range summons, so any of your archers or your mages, and it's basically just going to buff up all of your ranged summons in an area. Now, you can actually change the damage of this ability to fire, so at a base, it's going to add more necrotic damage and make all your summons do more necrotic damage, but it's going to add a ton of just overall damage to your summons. And the first thing we're going to be doing is going down, getting more area, so now it's guaranteed that all of your ranged summons will be in this radius to get more damage. We're going to go up to Lone Watcher, so now instead of Dread Wraith draining health from the minion it's on, it's now just going to make that minion take more damage, but it's not going to have them draining any health. And because it's always going to be on a ranged minion, they're not going to take as much damage, and it's going to last longer, so you're just going to plop this on one of your ranged minions and keep it there for long periods of time. Then as you continue to level up, you're just going to go down and get any damage buffs you can get. This gives increased attack speed, we have increased damage and area, so now all your minions within this are just dealing massive damage. And another really good node to massively increase the damage of this is Duskheart. So now any minions within your Dread Shade will have a chance to inflict damned on enemies they hit. And if you have 4 points in this, it's a 100% chance. And damned is a damage over time that also reduces that enemy's health regen, but we really only care that it's a damage over time. And because this is going to be on so many ranged minions, we currently have 5 mages and 8 archers, and we'll even get more than that. They'll be stacking up this damage over time very quickly. You'll see this on bosses especially, so that'll be doing a ton of additional damage. It's very easy to use. You just keep it on your ranged minions and they'll be pumping out tons of additional damage, even though we can't turn this in the fire to scale it to some crazy degree. And that brings us to our passive trees. So starting off, we're going into Blood Aura, just increased damage, increased minion damage, very big. Bone Aura, increased armor, increased minion armor, massive for our defensives. We have 4 points into Forbidden Knowledge, which is just some additional intelligence and necrotic resistances, and that's going to be the 20 points. The rest of our points for now we're going to be putting into the Necromancer tree, but as we get closer to max level, we're also going to be putting 8 points into Stolen Vitality, more minion health, always going to be good to increase your defensives. Then as we get into the Necromancer tree, 8 into Risen Army, just increase minion damage, cast speed, attack speed. We currently have 1 point in Grave Thorns. We may put more points into this just because it helps keep our minions alive even longer. We have 2 into Blood Armor. I currently have 10 in Mortal Tether, which massively increases our minion health, but it may actually be better to remove some points of this and put them into Blood Armor, which will give pretty massive health regen, which this build is lacking in ways to heal yourself. So it may actually be better to take points out of this and max out Blood Armor, but that'll require some testing. Then we have Unbound Necromancy for another additional skeleton summon. Then I also went up and got Dark Retribution. Anytime our minions die, they have a chance to summon a Vanguard. We can have 3 Vanguards. Now Vanguards only deal physical melee damage, but as this build is themed around having as many minions as you can have, having 3 basically permanent Vanguards up does help with that theming. I still need to do some testing to see if this is actually worth because I can't scale them or turn them into fire damage. Then 5 points into Effigies, which is just massively increased fire damage. And when we get low, we have a chance to consume a minion to heal us, which can help us stay alive a bit more easily. Then as we continue to level up, we're just going to be putting more points into damage for our minions. River of Bones, we're going to want maxed out for more crit chance. We're going to want Heresy maxed out, which is more crit chance and a lot more intelligence. We're going to be maxing out Moonlight Pyre, which is more minion fire damage. We're going to be maxing out Tyrant for more health. We're going to be maxing out Cling to Life, which is more vitality and minion resistances so they can stay alive. We're going to be going at least 1 point into Tyrant's Legions so we can get another summon of a skeleton, which will bring us up to 9 skeletal archers. We're going to be maxing out Rite of Undeath, which is just a ton of increased resistances and massively increased minion damage. Then we're also getting the 1 point into Disciples of Necromancy for another Skeletal Mage summon, so that puts us up to 5 mages total right now. But that's going to be pretty much all the nodes we're going into. We're just going to be maxing out basically all the nodes we've already gone into, which is going to give us a ton of additional defensives and massively increased minion damage. Now, as I'm only level 62, I basically just started to get into more of the endgame system, so a lot of my gear isn't that great. Currently don't have any of the unique items I want, and while you're leveling up, you're primarily going to want to be going going into just more damage for your minions, because until you start to get into the later acts like Act 7, 8, or 9 and start getting into the end game, you really don't need to care about your defensives. You just want your minions to be basically insta-killing everything. Now, as you get later into the end game, you're going to want more defensives, but the primary stats you're going to want to be going for are a lot of the more common sense stuff. You're going to want increased minion health, increased ranks to any of your minions, increased minion damage, increased fire damage, any of the rolls like plus melee damage or spell damage to your minions. Basically, any different rolls that are going to scale up your minion damage. You're going to want rings with the minion damage and health implicits. Necklace is going to be good for the implicits for more minion damage and more minion crit. And then past just scaling up all your minion damage, you're going to want a lot of defensive stats. And the main defensives you're going to want to go into as you start to get more into the end game, health is always going to be something very important for basically every build. You're going to want to scale your health pretty much as you can. You're going to want to be getting all your resistances to 75%, which is their cap. But as you're leveling up, the main thing you want to get is physical. Then as you get into the later acts, lightning is also going to be really good because some of the more difficult bosses in the campaign are going to be dealing almost entirely lightning damage. And then you're just going to want to be getting all your resistances to 75%. That's going to be one of your first main defensive goals. Then you're going to be wanting to get armor. This is just damage reduction from pretty much everything. This is going to be very good and one of the other main defensive stats you're going to want to be getting. And then as you get even further into the end game and you start to optimize more, you're also going to want to be going into endurance and endurance threshold. If you don't know how this works, you have an endurance percentage, so mine's 23%, and then you have an endurance threshold. So the percentage is how much damage reduction you're going to get, and the threshold is how much health that damage reduction is going to be applied to. So if I get to 156 life or below, I'm going to be getting 23% damage reduction. So you're going to want to have this capped, which it caps out at 60%, so you get 60% damage reduction, and then you're going to want at least a few hundred endurance threshold, 300-400 maybe once you get later into the end game. And then once you've optimized all those defensive stats, you can even start to go into things like critical strike avoidance or even maybe glancing blows. But that's going to be super late into the end game, and I'll probably have another video doing an update on this build as I get higher level. But that's pretty much the entirety of this build. And this build is actually one of the first builds I used when I first started trying out Last Epoch back in like 2020. And I think it's actually still pretty strong in 1.0, especially while you're going through the campaign. If you're following along with the skills and skill specialization trees, your minions are pretty much going to be one-shotting or almost one-shotting everything. Even once you get into some of the harder campaign bosses, having all these minions set up like this, you'll just be destroying bosses, destroying everything very quickly. Your defenses are going to lack early on, so you're primarily going to want to be focused on running around and dodging anything enemies are throwing at you. And then once you start building up your defensives, you're going to be pretty tanky and your minions are just going to be dealing crazy amounts of damage. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.